Welcome back. I'm Professor Pachel, and I'm going to take you through the poetry analysis essay here. It says at the top, poetry midterm. I used to give this as a midterm when we were face to face. It's now an essay. Okay. Your task is to construct a college essay in MLA format, Modern Language Association format, of no less than 2 pages and no more than 3 pages, analyzing the following poem. Okay. Um, Now, it's going to take you about 3 pages. Make sure to double space, okay? And you want to quote from the poem as well. So, this poem doesn't really have a title. So, when a poem doesn't have a title, we usually just use the first line. And the first line of this poem is, "As for me, I delight in the everyday way." I'm going to read the poem and then I'm going to walk you through the guided prompt. As for me, I delight in the everyday way, among mist-wrapped vines and rocky caves. Here in the wilderness, I am completely free, with my friends, the white clouds, idling forever. There are roads, but they do not reach the world. Since I am mindless, who can rouse my thoughts? On a bed of stone I sit, alone in the night, while the round moon climbs up cold mountain. So that's your poem. It's a very simple, straightforward poem, but it does have some poetic devices in it that you're going to want to take a look at. Now, I point the poetic devices out, so just doing that is not good enough for you. You've got to show how they work, where they are, how they work. I tell you what's in there, okay, but you have to do the work. And you want this in a well written college essay, okay? But it shouldn't take you too long. I've laid it out in a pretty detailed way so that you can handle it in maybe a couple of hours. Let's see. So, write a close reading analysis of this poem. You want to first of all think about who the speaker can be. Okay, so you want to imagine what type of person would tell a poem like this, okay? And don't say the author. And also don't Google this poem and find the author's name. I didn't include the author purposefully so that you would have to imagine a speaker. Who is the speaker of this poem? And what is the situation? Approximate time and place. Obviously, you don't know the year or, but there are some time markers given in the poem, right? So think about that. Uh, you also want to uh, think, is there a tension in this poem? Identify that tension and relate it to the theme. So your big thing here is you're going to have to, what's the theme of this poem? Okay. In line 2 of the poem, there's aesthetics to set the scene with economic use of words. Okay. So you want to kind of give some attention to those aesthetics and how do they contribute to the theme of the poem and the overall unity of the poem. The second line also employs synecdoche and metonymy. How and to what representational effect are they used in this poem? Okay, you're going to have to use the literary lexicon to look up those terms and understand them. Okay, how does mist-wrapped work metaphorically? It's kind of an interesting line, right? Mist-wrapped. Can you wrap something in mist? What could the roads and the world be metaphors for? In other words, what could they be replacing in the poem? Is there something else? Or are roads metonymy for something or metaphor? Uh, how is personification used in the poem and to what effect? Since I am mindless is kind of a paradoxical statement, right? The speaker of the poem is actually saying that they're mindless, but they're here telling us a poem and giving us their thoughts. And something that tells a poem and gives thoughts has got to have a mind. So you might want to talk about, how that gives off some irony, right? That means that what we expect doesn't happen. In fact, sometimes the opposite happens. How could something be mindless and be thinking and and also telling a poem at the same time. So you want to get the theme of the poem. You know, what's the concept or idea at work in this poem? And that's going to be your thesis. So for your essay, you're gonna want it in standard essay form using paragraphs. You're going to want an introduction. You're going to give it your own original title. Okay, don't use the poem's title. It doesn't even have one. Make up a title for your essay. And so as part of your introduction, you're going to have that title. You're going to introduce your subject. You're going to have a signal phrase. And you don't have to say the whole line of the whole first line of the poem. You can just say, you can call the poem "As for Me," and that should be in quotations. Okay, make your focus clear. Interest the reader. What's the relevance to here and now? That's always going to put your essay up a couple of notches, the bigger meaning. So at the end of your introduction, you should give a clear position, okay? And that will be your statement telling what the theme of this poem is. That's going to be your thesis statement, and maybe how it relates to everyday life. Okay. You want to give a little background, maybe. Your first impression of reading the poem. Whatever the reader needs to know to gain more insight into your analysis. Not a lot. You don't need a lot for this because all you have is the poem. You've encountered it, right? Maybe a little background. Do you have some experience with something that it goes on in the poem? It's up to you really on this one. Now, the next part, and these aren't necessarily paragraphs, they could be, but these are tasks that your writing should do. In the next part is where you actually look at specific lines of the poem, specific figures of speech, those metaphors, synecdoche, whatever you can find in the poem to aid in your analysis and to demonstrate what the theme is and what it means. Okay, so assume your reader is familiar with the poem. Okay, don't think that you have to record the whole poem in your essay. Don't do that. Okay, you want to look at specific words and phrases and pieces, maybe even a line, but don't put the whole poem in your essay. And answer as many of the questions you can deal with above as your theme allows. You should hit most of those bold-faced terms up there in the prompt. Now, I want you to also, I used to give this exam in class, and it seems like almost every time somebody would try to argue that this is a wolf or some moss growing on the side of a rock. Okay, now, without getting too philosophical, I want to say, as far as we know, moss doesn't have thoughts like this, and a wolf probably doesn't have thoughts like this, right? So you're going to dispute the claim that this is the speaker is an animal or vegetable or mineral. In other words, you're going to say this. Some people may think that this is an animal, but it is definitely human. Okay, so whatever the speaker is, it is human. So that's what you're going to do in this next part. Dispute that claim and give a good reason for it. Okay. At the conclusion, you want to make the poem relevant to the here and now. What does it mean to us now? And leave the reader with a galvanizing thought and an impactful line or phrase from the poem that underscores your position. Okay, so you're sort of summing up your thoughts. You want to re-emphasize the theme, the ideas in the poem that you find, and kind of make it relevant to your reader. Okay. Now, you could think of this as a regular in-class midterm in your approach and write your original response in one sitting for a rough draft. This is what I recommend. So sit down, give yourself an hour, write a draft. Of course, you would have to know the terms or have them handy. I want you to use these analytical terms in your analysis. It's very important. Okay. That's part of our critical thinking aspect of this class. And also take time to do some careful editing and proofreading. Read your essay out loud when you're finished so that you can see how it sounds, and see if it you catch any confusing lines that you wrote in there. Okay, so that's a good thing to do. Turn in an excellent essay, but don't do internet searches. Like I said, it could cloud your reading. If I see an author's name in here, or if I see author in here, chances are you're not going to do well. We're interested in the speaker, the situation, the theme, the figures of speech, what this poem ultimately means to the average reader. Okay, so make the poem as meaningful as your writing allows. And as always, growl on and write on, Cougars. Thank you.